So we're back for the second half of the night. I want to thank you all for staying. I think that needs to be commended as well. And also, I want to thank you guys now, or give the floor up to you, because you've heard us speak, you've heard Derek Purnell speak, you've heard Niall Ford speak, you've heard Adam Elliott Cooper speak, you've heard Mitchell Assange speak, and now we want to hear you speak. So, fingers up in the air, or I'm going to just point someone out. Yeah. Can you stand up and say your name?
Sure. I'm Max. I'm from the University of Color. Maybe interesting as background. So, student movement that's trying to decolonize the university. So, I wanted to make a contribution rather than a sort of comment on what you said. It's been implicitly implied as well, for instance, what you said, Adam, with the migrants and the weapons going to Saudi Arabia, or Mitchell said, like, we should not reproduce oppression globally. But the thing is, we talked mainly about our own context, right? UK, US, Netherlands. And we should always look not only from our own context, but what's down. Like Frans Fanon said, the last shall be first, right? And I think what's very interesting in his book, also what he pointed out when he was talking about Algeria in Wretched of the Earth, he talks about the difference between cities and, for instance, rural areas, right? So, and when we're talking, right, we're here in the center with, I don't know, shoes. I don't know how my shoes came to be. We have a Beamer and everything, right? So. The thing is, if we're demanding equal rights here, we don't know even the amount of, let's say we have all the equal rights, it's still not going to be here, because the sort of down the line, the most of the oppression is further towards, let's say, the outer skirts of colonialism. So, and what I wanted to say with this is that colonialism has been a force of erasure, basically destroying all different forms of life. I mean, if I look around here, maybe we have 20 or 30 different nationalities, let's say. Even if everyone or half here would be from Suriname, then still we don't know, like, the actual roots could be still very different, dispersed. So the thing is, we don't want equal rights as the white man, let's say, or the sort of white ideal. We don't want to mirror that, I think, or we shouldn't want to mirror that, because that whole image, the story of this consumer is like, oh, we want also a big house, or we want, or we want also the perfect job. We shouldn't want, it's like very low standards, I would say, because the way we get our things now, it's a shame. And that's what I wanted to say, that we should always not forget, the last shall be first, to end again with Frans Fanon.
Okay.
So we should always remember the context, even broader.
So in a certain sense, you're asking us to look at our own privilege.
Yes.
In a certain sense.
In a way.
In a way, yeah. Mitchell, what do you say to that?
I agree, and simply try to make the point during my short talk as well, that on the one hand, yes, you need equal rights in terms of being treated like a normal human being. That you're not more likely to be shot by the police, or not more likely to be unemployed because of the color of your skin. So in terms of being treated as a human being, I think, yes, we should demand equal rights. But in terms of change of structures and systems, I indeed plead to look beyond equal rights and just having more representatives, more black faces in White Houses. Because what I try to say, indeed, if we continue to reproduce this neoliberal capitalist system, we won't even have a world to live in in a normal way in 30 years. And on the one hand, my background is in anthropology, but I also studied business administration, did my research on sustainable water management, on how companies, businesses exploit natural resources such as water to make a profit. And during that study I learned how even water is, which is so normal for us, with it here. No one can live without water. But if we continue to live and reproduce this economic system, in 2030 there will be a water shortage of 60%. And there are already certain places in the world, in India, even in the United States, in California, where climate change is creating a shortage of water. So I definitely agree. On the one hand, yes, we need an equal way of being treated as human beings, but we definitely need a transformative change of the economic system.
Mitchell kind of threw the ball to you guys by looking at the way how in the States these water shortages are happening, and also this privilege of who gets to live in an area with food. I mean, I've heard of food deserts, which I find really disturbing. And also the notion of the blackface in the White House. I mean, it's Obama who's pushing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and also here TTIP in Europe. So what do you guys say to that, as Americans?
Oh, chill. I mean, yes, I think it's crazy that in the world's like richest country, who's also like in hella debt, to like have neighborhoods that have food, that are food deserts. Not only food deserts in the sense that there isn't a grocery store where you can access food, but there's also what's a good word? Fast food proliferation. Yeah. So you're taking out like what you need in order to survive, in order to live as a human being, and you're replacing, you're putting into these communities McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, and the food is really, really cheap. And all of these things are interconnected, because if kids are getting home from school every day and they only have to pay $1 for a mac chicken, yeah. What's a mac chicken? It's not a farm animal. I don't know what that is. Like a mac rib, no one knows what meat these things really come from. You know what's a problem? When they have to advertise real chicken. Like, what is real chicken? That means the other stuff that's not real chicken is fake chicken. So they can't even advertise it. It's like chicken. They have to put an MC in front of it. Yeah. So kids are putting this stuff into their bodies. It's impacting how they're able. So I taught before law school. It impacts how they're able to do their homework, how they're able to read. It upsets what their B complex vitamins, so they're not getting all the nutrients they have, so they're not getting the energy, so they come to school the next day. It impacts how they're able to concentrate. So it's not just about food deserts, it's about all these other environmental triggers that impact how Black children are being raised, how poor children are being raised. I'm not that familiar on water shortages in California. I'm not familiar with that at all. But one thing I can say, this is a very, very interesting fact. In St. Louis, we have headquartered Anheuser-Busch. And I remember growing up as a kid, like smelling the yeast from like the beer. And that's another environmental problem. But to my understanding, Anheuser-Busch pays the city of St. Louis to clean its water really, really well, so the beer would taste better. So when it makes sense for when it makes sense for capitalism, we have all these great ideas. Imagine all beer companies pay the local communities to clean their water, right? Imagine what water would taste like. Imagine that it's cleaner, but since it makes better tasting beer, then that's great. I also remember hearing that it's easier for someone in the United States to buy Fiji water than someone who lives in Fiji. That's a problem. Like, that's a problem. Like, we have water from this country, from this place, and people there also have water shortages. So it is a problem, but again, when it makes money, then it becomes a good idea.
Yeah. Adam, when looking at our own privilege as well, you're from England, the premier colonial entity of the world, right? At a certain point, let's be honest, at a certain point, 95% of the world was yours.
Well, it wasn't mine, mate.
Yes. I've never heard Nate in real life. That just blew my mind. Nate, I've never heard that in real life.
Yeah, so Britain won the competition for European competitive colonisation.
Yeah, but I mean, but how do you move? How do you move beyond that? How do you? Because I think when talking about fundamental change, I think you guys have it the worst because it's so.
Yeah.
If I'm.
Yeah, I think Britain is
right.
probably the most reactionary nation on the planet.
Mm.
If there is going to be a global revolution, Britain will be the final country on the planet to be like, okay, cool, let's stop this nonsense and let's just have socialism. Like, it will be it's such a reactionary country, and I think it's not a coincidence that it's a very, very reactionary country and also the historical centre of empire.
Mm.
I think those two features are very much interrelated. And so therefore, when I think about political action, I don't think about revolutionary change within the borders of Britain.
Mm.
I understand that if there is going to be any kind of revolutionary movement in the world, it's going to come from the peoples of the global south. And so if I take that into consideration, I have to think, okay, so what can I do from the privileged position of being in one of the centres of empire to help to facilitate that? And one of the best things I think we can probably do is to be as utterly disruptive as we possibly can. And one way of being very, very disruptive is by constantly challenging the socio-political system in which we currently live. Disrupting the way in which it functions, disrupting its flows of capital, doing all of these forms of political action, whether they be in solidarity with the kind of gentrification we see in black communities in London, or in solidarity with the migrants trying to get to the United Kingdom, or in solidarity with the peoples of the global south who are going to be further underdeveloped by things like TTP. In so doing, I see the only real, tangible thing that we can do to further any kind of fundamental change in the world. It's disruption. There's going to be no revolution in Britain.
Yeah?
Can you stand up?
Yes, of course. My name is Shivani. I'm the former secretary of the Europe Collective, and I have a question for you, Adam, regarding this. I find it quite interesting, like the figure of Jamie Corbyn, was his name?
Yes.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, I find his figure quite interesting, and you told us earlier on that you think that he will not be able to lead us and you in the UK to change. What exactly is he lacking of, and what competences should such a representative have without dismissing the disruptive change discourse, and do we need these representatives at all? Because we were also talking about rhetorics and substance of speaking and doing. So you have on the whole left side, you have this Jamie Corbyn, who is, very active in this disruptive change discourse, and then on the other side, you have this political hypnosis of Obama. Do we need these representatives at all, and what assets do they need to have?
I don't think that Jeremy Corbyn is not going to be able to win the next election because there's necessarily something wrong with him. I think Jeremy Corbyn is going to be unable to win the next election because there's something fundamentally wrong with the political system. Jeremy Corbyn, yes, fantastic politician. He's a very warm person. He's a very personable human being. With every single media outlets in the country completely against him, he won the Labour leadership election by a landslide. He got more votes for the Labour leadership election than all of the other candidates combined. More people have joined the Labour Party than are in the Liberal Democrats, which is Britain's third largest party, combined. More people have joined since he became leader. It's a phenomenal success, despite all of the media attacks that have been made on him, and the fact that probably about 3/4 of his party are basically soft neoliberals and are therefore trying to attack him at every juncture as well. So I don't think that it's something that's wrong with Jeremy Corbyn. I think it's something that's fundamentally wrong with the political system. And so therefore, but without that, saying that, I don't want to negate his importance. As I said before, I think he's shifted the debates, the remit of the debate. The mainstream press has to now discuss the prospects of not bombing Syria. In 2011, when Britain bombed Libya into dust, the prospects of not bombing Libya was not on the kind of the spectrum of debate. It was, to what extent will we bomb this country into dust? In what way will we bomb this country into dust? On what specific date and time will we bomb this country into dust? That was the remit of debate. So shifting that debate, I think, is hugely useful. And it's kind of bringing to light quite important possibilities, quite basic things like not killing lots of people. And so I think he's very, very useful for that reason. So I think we do need people like Jeremy Corbyn to cause disruptions in the mainstream debate. But I think it's important to not become complacent when people like Jeremy Corbyn help to change the remit of the debate. Because as soon as we become complacent, we see these individual figures easily disposed of or what have you, and then we end up having to start from square one all over again, if we don't mind.
Niall, can you answer it in regards to Obama?
Can you restate the question one more time? Sorry.
What assets do leaders need to be able to disrupt and push? And also, do we actually need leaders to disrupt and push?
I think it's an excellent question. I'll take a shot at it and hopefully add something of value. So, while, as I said earlier, there is a reality when we elect someone, anyone, not just President Obama, but when we elect anyone, and the energy that went into electing that person oftentimes is zapped after the election, because there's so much energy that's put into getting the person elected, and not as much energy in getting the ideas in which that person espouses elected, right? And so I think that phenomena is real, and it's something that worries me and worries, I think, many of us with electoral politics just in general. What kind of characteristics, so we all need leaders, right? We need leaders at different levels of society. I think as long as there are electoral politics, I want people, personally, in those places that have my best interests and my community's best interests at heart. I understand that there are some people who just don't believe in the electoral process at all. While I'm deeply suspicious and curious of it, so long as it exists, I'm interested in who's there. So with that said, I think that we need politicians who are not simply about rhetoric. And so that's something I haven't been able to figure out how to gauge, because they actually are elected based off rhetoric. Obama got elected because of hope. I mean, hope and change were the two buzzwords that allowed him, right? And of course, a drove of people who believed in this hope and change to get him elected. So I'm not sure if there are measures that are in place, aside from looking at what they've done in the past, to sort of gauge, okay, I understand what you're saying that you're going to do, but how do we figure out, and this is sort of an open-ended question that maybe we can think about together, what kind of measures can we hold people accountable, not just after they get elected, but before they get elected, and then also after they get elected. So I don't have the answer, but I'm deeply interested and committed to how we can figure out how to weave through folks' rhetoric, how to weave through the way we sort of get swooped up by what people say and get down to the baseline of what folks do. I think one of it takes looking at their actual track record. And so, and those folks who have that track record, doing popular education to people in communities who may not have access to that track record. So where I live in Newark, New Jersey, there's a lot of misinformation about candidates. So I think organizations that provide information in a way that's accessible to day-to-day people as to, okay, I know such and such came to your church last Sunday and said these things, but you need to know that these are the things that this candidate has done over the past 5 years. And giving people the opportunity to be politically engaged and empowered in that way. If we can do that on a local and national level, I think that's something that may be helpful.
So, good evening, everyone. My name is Lucas Johnson, and I represent the International Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is this network of activists around the world, and we were happy to bring Niall and Derek here. I feel like we've been talking about this, and the last question and the responses really speak to this concern, but I feel like there's always this tension between, in my organizing work and in my life and experience, there's always this tension between reform and revolution, right? And how, I would just be interested in hearing, this brilliant group assembled here reflect a little bit more on what that tension looks like in your own work, in your own organizing, and how you respond to that tension, how you mitigate it, And what do you think, like, you know, how do you think that we need to deal with those two sort of demands and forces in our work?
Can you define revolution and reform?
No. I mean, I thought about doing that, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to leave it like deliberately open-ended. But I'll do this. Let's say we were talking about electoral politics, right? And of course, now you just referenced the extent to which people distrust the system and believe that the system in and of itself is a distraction, right? I feel like that was kind of one of the central messages of what's the political comedian in the UK, Russell Brand, Russell Brand, right? It was like some of his movement, some of his popularity, like kind of centers around that type of rhetoric. So there's an extent to which the system in place is a distraction, right? Yet, you know, Niall, as you just said, in as much as electoral politics is at work, you want to be engaged in you know, and interested and invested in who that person is. And so I feel like you're both conceding to the fact that, you know, we need a change that is far more expansive than our political systems seem to be capable of producing, yet we recognize that we're impacted by those very systems and we need to sort of engage them somehow. But if they're a distraction, then engaging them can perhaps become counter-revolutionary in some way, right? And I feel like these are the tensions that I often encounter in our communities. And I'm wondering what your experiences are and how you think about them.
Let's start with Mitchell, because you touched upon that in your talk, your opening talk.
For a part, yeah. Because I do think everybody who is active within, you know, community organizations who have the ideal of bringing about transformative change feel this tension. And I think the reason is because on the one hand we have this material reality. All of us need to drink water, all of us need to eat, we need to survive. And the reality is that we live in this neoliberal capitalistic system which has been structured in a way where you need euros, pounds, dollars to be able to...
Passports.
To a certain extent to survive. Which means all of us are in a way dependent on this economic system, at least that's what I think. Whilst at the same time, we need and we want to change this same system. And to give one example, you know, I work at the university, the University of Amsterdam. It's one of the most white universities, I think, in the world. At least in Amsterdam, and compared to the UvA, I'm the only black person within, you know, the space, social science. So on the one hand, if I would speak out and you know, share my ideas continuously about how the university needs to change, how the you know, what is wrong with the system, with the educational system, with this particular institution, then, you know, you run the risk of being alienated out of this institution.
And fired.
Fired, for example.
Beat up.
Which means you will have, it will be a bit more difficult to survive. So I think this tension between this material reality of survival, a very basic thing, and this ideal of a different world, which is also it's not concrete. Personally, I don't know a very concrete solution or alternative economic, social, and political system besides the system which has been in place and developed over the past 400 years. So I think that is one of the sources of tension. And the second one touches upon the question that was just asked, that I think that often we put a lot of hope and responsibility actually in the people that we elect, in leaders. You know, we tend to idealize and idolize and sometimes Santa Clausify, you know, certain people. We put all of the responsibility outside of ourselves. Whilst I think that if we really want to make that change and you know, make sure that the ideals that you know, these leaders have put forward, we need to take much more responsibility ourselves. As a community, as individuals, we need to be, you know, critical. We need to think about how we as people within our own community can, you know, contribute to those ideals that these, you know, politicians have put forward. If we put all of our hopes in one person, such as Obama, I think we're believing in dreams and illusions. So I think those two parallels are two sources of this tension.
I'm going to come to your question quick, but I want to ask you guys quickly, revolutionary or reformer? Derek.
Well, you know already.
Are these one-word answers?
One word answer.
Reformer shooting.
No, that's cheating.
That's finessing. So, I think white supremacy is forcing you to make you choose between these two things. And I want you to check that.
No.
That's a good answer. I really have to respond because I have so much I want to say. I consider myself in a tradition of revolutionary pragmatism, combining a revolutionary imagination and impulse with what can we actually do in the world, understanding that revolutionary qualifies what we can actually do. It actually sets the groundwork for what we can actually do. So I think it doesn't resolve the tension, but it sits in that tension and say, all right, let's go. Let's figure out what we can do.
I am going to add to that because I didn't know we could explain. Because when I asked you if I could explain, you were like, nah, but then I'll explain. So when I think of the word revolution, like the pictures that come to my mind are people in like leather vests, and there's like fire, and there's like all these like residential evil, post-apocalyptic sort of like fighting things happening, and then something really beautiful comes out, you know, like in the movie there's like a flower with like a really green leaf amidst all the, okay. So like those are the pictures, but honestly to get to revolution, it does take everyday work to get there. And I think reform can be a means to revolution. I don't think that we have to choose. I think it's okay that there's tension there, but I think the reform, the pragmatism of it all is how we get to the revolution that we want to achieve.
It kind of makes me think about when I first read about Ella Baker, who was an organizer during the Civil Rights Movement, right? And she always said that when you want to organize with people and incorporate people into your struggle, you have to address the issues that are in their immediate reality. And so when she was organizing in the South during the Civil Rights Movement, she identified the fact that a lot of young people wanted to go and eat in like burger restaurants and stuff, and they were unable to due to segregation. And so she'd organise and be like, okay, so let's do sit-ins in these restaurants and so on and so forth. But then she had this slogan which said, more than just a hamburger. And so what it was doing was, it was identifying, okay, there's this issue in your immediate reality in your life that you see as unjust, and we want to do something about it, we want to reform it. However, this issue is more than just about being able to sit at a restaurant and eat a hamburger. It's bigger than that. It's linked to a far more fundamental question about the way in which racial injustice is meted out within our society. And so I think being able to link the reforms that make our everyday existence more tolerable to the systems of injustice which cause that more, maybe smaller aggression in our everyday lives is really fundamental to revolutionising the way in which we think about the way in which society is structured.
And really, I just want to add something going, and this is very important. So something you mentioned earlier, Adam, was the Black Panther Party's Survival Pending Revolution program. And so I think we have a concrete example in history of a group of people, imperfect, sure, but who is doing just that. They had programs, they went to a community and said, okay, well, we want these kids to learn, we want them to learn things that they're not being taught in school, so we're going to give them books. We're going to give them the kinds of books that they don't get in school. But you know, they can't learn if they're hungry. So we're going to have to give them food to make sure that they can learn. So we're going to create a Breakfast for Children program, and we're going to connect that to a set of politics, right? So it's not just we're going to give out books and that becomes charity, but it means that we're going to give out books connected to a set of ideas, to an imagination, a radical, black radical imagination, which connects everyday things that people need in their community to a broader set of just not imagination but practices, I think.
Yeah.
Something.
Mitchell, revolutionary or reformer?
I've always seen myself as a, you know, kind of touches on what you said, an idealistic pragmatist. You know, I have these ideals of how I would like to see, you know, the world, and I know that, you know, this social, political, economic system in which we are living is unsustainable. If we continue to live in this way in 30 years, you know, it may be very apocalyptic, such as you see in certain movies. But at the same time, you know, we can have these kinds of debates and abstract talks, you know, every day. But at the same time, we have this material reality where people need, you know, food, clothes, shelter, and education. And I think education is one of the most important tools, which Mandela said you can use to change the world. Sounds very beautiful, but I think it's very imperative. I mean, to get back to the discussion we just had, you know, often we look at the leader, but if we don't have a community that is politically educated about how the political system works, we cannot keep them accountable. So that's why I said, if, you know, 30, 40 persons here, if everybody here would do something within their own community, you know, to contribute to a different, you know, change in the system, I think we could make an impact. And I think it's also, I think we've been learned and conditioned in a way by this capitalistic system to think in terms of, you know, these structures and these hierarchies, that we need one political leader, one system to be able to make an impact. Whilst I think that in a different kind of social, cultural, political and economic system, we will need more kinds of local, organized, you know, systems and structures.
Hubs of resistance.